Minister, for many years I've been raising the concerns of people in the film industry, and this question relates to particularly actors, writers, directors, performers who are forced by film producers in this country to sign buyout contracts, which are contracts far inferior to what actors, performers, writers and directors get in other jurisdictions. It is a breach in the view of equity and the performers and my view of the copyright directive, these buyout contracts, and the question is, what is the government doing to progress the concerns of the actors and performers?
Deputy, as you be aware, copyright legislation ensures that all authors and performers, including actors, performers, writers and directors, are protected by provisions of copyright legislation where the authors or performers choose to transfer their right to another party, for example, to producers of a film or TV industry. The transfer of rights is usually done by way of a licence or a contract, which a remuneration is due to the authors or performers in exchange for the transfer of his or her intellectual property rights. It is agreed between parties concerned. Copyright legislation does not prescribe how such agreements should be made. The contractual matter is a matter for the parties. However, these contractual arrangements must be cognizant of the relevant provisions of the EU directive on copyright in the Digital Single Market 2019, and that was transposed into Irish legislation by way of SI 567/2021, the European Union Copyright and Related Rights in the Single Digital Market Regulations 2021. While Irish copyright legislation does not specifically mention buyout contracts, compliance with Part 6 of the statutory instrument 567/2021 compels the principle of appropriate and proportionate remuneration to be included in contract rights for holders and describes how this should be achieved. So Regulation 27 provides for a transparency obligation, meaning that the right holder must receive from the party to whom the rights holder has been transferred his or her rights detailed information on how the work has been exploited. The provision ensures that authors and performers have access to an increased level of information about the exploitation of their works and performances, which is necessary to allow rights holders to access their economic value adequately and continuously. Having obtained information by way of Regulation 27, Regulation 28 then offers authors and performers a contract adjustment mechanism when the remuneration originally agreed to turns out to be disproportionately low. So this is comparing the success of their work or the performance to the resulting revenues generated, and this gives them rights under it.
More transparency about how much money is generated out of the films is welcome, but the problem, as I've been trying to explain to the government and have the representatives, the writers and the directors and the performers, is the people who have the whip hand are the producers, right? And you want a job, you sign this contract. Otherwise, you don't get a job. That's the way it actually works. And the contracts being offered to writers and directors, actors and performers are inferior, dramatically inferior than what you get in other jurisdictions. The terrible thing here is those film producers are only the producers of the films because the Irish government gives them money to make the films through Section 481 film tax credit, which is supposed to be for quality employment and training. Now, my committee has recommended that something is done about this, but nothing really ever gets done. And it's past the parcel between Department of Enterprise, Department of Finance, Department of Arts, Department of Social Protection, all of whom should be working together to stop this mistreatment of our talent and the people who work in the film industry in this country.
Thank you very much, Deputy. So just to clarify, Regulation 27 is about transparency. But then once you have your transparency, Regulation 28 kicks in, and that offers authors and performers a contractual adjustment mechanism when the remuneration originally agreed turns out to be disproportionately low compared to the success of their work. So I think that's important to clarify. And I suppose, to be clear, the existing copyright legislation ensures that right holders have an effective means of enforcing their rights by way of proceedings before the appropriate court. alternative dispute resolution mechanisms, which are without prejudice to any judicial remedies, are also provided for too. And I suppose on a separate matter, I am happy to confirm that my department recently received government approval to draft and to publish a short bill to address a known mischief detected in the Copyright and Related Rights Act, and I will be talking to the House about that at a later point. But just to acknowledge the work done by your committee on this, and I suppose maybe just to specify that tax credit that that tax credit that you mentioned, if you want, I can go into further details on that and the budgetary oversight element of it, if you wish.
Well, I was the one who asked our committee to do that report, so I know quite a lot about it, with respect. And I'm pretty familiar with this issue because I've been bringing it up for about 4 years. And the problem is nothing ever changes, really. Okay, so I'd be interested to see this legislation, and if it's going to make a difference, could you please tell us when that legislation is actually coming up? But to repeat, there is an easier way to do this, and this is for the government to crack the whip on the film producers. Because the government gives the money. Now, it's not specifically your department, but everybody is working together on this. And what the EU directive says is, buyout contracts should be the exception, not the rule. In Ireland, they're the rule. Right? So they shouldn't be the rule, and the government should crack the whip and just say, stop this. Stop forcing the actors, the performers, the writers, directors to sign out contracts which essentially give away their right to future revenues if films turn out to be successful. I mean, 3,500 of them have signed the petition calling for action on this, and a lot of actors, you know, I mean, it's signed by some of the top names, but actually they're not the ones who need it. It's the majority of actors and performers who live in relative poverty.
Thanks very much, Deputy. Just in relation to your specific question around legislation in this area, it'll be in relation to the sharing of royalty payments between producers and performers of recorded music. And I recently sought and received government approval to address this matter by amending copyright primary legislation. So drafting is going to proceed accordingly on this shortly. As you've said, your committee has done, under your own ask, has done quite a lot of work on this. And I know in January, recommendations were published in relation to Section 481 tax credits. The committee's report on this, I think, was then published earlier this week. And the report's recommendations cut across, as you have acknowledged, a number of different departments, and cross-departmental cooperation is going to be required here. I understand the forum has previously been held, and that met in February, and it was consistent of a mix of plenary and breakout sessions, and to discuss the tax credit issue and copyright issue at length. And I expect that learnings from this forum are going to be informing the policy considerations on this going forward.